Picking colors isn't easy. Maybe there's a nice deep teal that you really like for your next project. But how do you go about selecting the supporting colors to build a cohesive palette around it? Rechroma was built to help with this, but before we dive into how it works, I'd like to give you some background on why I built Rechroma in the first place. For our color picking task, we could turn to the trusty color wheel and apply some basic color theory. We could use a traditional color harmony like complementary, or analogous, or even triadic. These can be good starting points for exploring colors, but in most color wheels and harmonies, you're left with a very flat-looking palette. For example, if we take the complementary color for this teal, by grabbing the color on the opposite side of the color wheel, we get this burgundy that, well, complements our base color. And while this might be a suitable style and palette for some projects, it might be missing an energy that we look for in other applications. An energy that we can bring by adding contrast. And we can do that by going beyond the flat 2D color wheel and considering the full 3D color space. This is the Oklch color space, and as you can see, it is a cylindrical space. We can think of each circular slice along the vertical axis as a color wheel at a different lightness level, darkest at the bottom and lightest at the top. And by increasing the vertical distance between our two original colors, we get greater lightness separation and contrast. These two resulting colors now have a very different feel to the originals. We might describe it as more energetic, modern, or exciting. And so Rechroma was built with this idea at its core. The colors in a palette are like a constellation in a three-dimensional space, and the structure represents some relationship that when translated into visual space can evoke a certain emotion. It could represent serenity, or tension, or provide us with a reference to something we've observed in nature. Because Rechroma is built around the perceptually uniform color space, Oklab, and its polar counterpart Oklch, the distance between colors is meaningful, and the relationship can be translated to other sets of colors. This gave us the ability to analyze a lot of different color palettes and let our color engine recommend much more interesting and dynamic palettes that go beyond simple color harmonies. The user interface is also constructed with a lot of care, with a design that was inspired by retro synthesizers and terminal hardware. I wanted it to feel like a true workspace, with chunky buttons and device-like modules that give users a fun and tactile experience. And finally, Rechroma was designed to slot into designer and developer workflows, with utilities that make color work much easier and faster. There's a visualizer to quickly preview your palettes in different applications, and you can also create a color kit from your palette, which will automatically generate full color scales for each of your palette colors. This is important for UIs where you need tints and shades to define a hierarchy of elements visually. You can also name your colors and assign roles. With Rechroma Pro, you can export palettes and color kits to CSS to use in your code, or sync them directly into Figma as variables using the Rechroma Figma plugin, which means you don't need to manually create these one by one anymore. My hope is that Rechroma gives you a more thoughtful and inspiring way to work with color, while making the practical parts of building a color system faster and easier. Thanks for taking a look, and I hope you try it out.